So yeah, from that standpoint, and then you've got the assassination of General Soleimani, and then the other assassinations that have taken place with Western support. So yeah, Iran's look. I could certainly understand there are elements within the Iranian political system. They're going to say, no way in hell, we're not going to negotiate with the United States. They're our enemy. But I think there still will be an element of pragmatism that will come to the fore, and that Trump will work hard to actually get this deal done. So, hey, I could be wrong. Wouldn't be the first time, but I don't see Trump. Trump's made it clear he doesn't want to go to war with Iran. He keeps talking. Iran will never get a nuclear weapon. That's sort of, that is sort of setting up a straw man argument, because the reality is that in Iran, Ali Khamenei has not said, yeah, we're going to build a nuke. No, it's just the opposite. So until that changes, Iran's not going to get a nuke. And then on top of it, this security agreement with Russia makes it even more unlikely that they would be able to use Russia's going to help build up their nuclear industry, but for peaceful purposes. And that comes with, I think, an unstated condition, which is you can't have a nuke. We'll protect you. You can't have a nuke. Well, that's why, BRICS, the whole nature of BRICS has changed as a result of Russia's special military operation in Ukraine, and then the ensuing sanctions from the West. It really made BRICS more of a necessity, because, traditionally the United States, by virtue of its dollar as a reserve currency, was able to, threaten and do significant harm to countries that didn't sort of toe the line, which is why, Iran has suffered under these sanctions. But now with BRICS, they're creating something outside of the U.S. dollar that Iran will serve Iran well. And now, again, the United States is trying to go after Iranian oil to shut it down. I think that effort will fail. This isn't going to be won by force. If Trump wants to accomplish anything, it's going to have to be done through negotiation. So we'll see. It will be interesting to see where Trump is going to focus, overseas or here at home, because what he's doing to the federal government, shaking it up in ways that, like I said, no president has done before him, it's dramatic. And, I think that will shift a lot of the attention away from overseas. I think Trump is serious about trying to negotiate a deal with Iran. And listen, Iran, I would fully if I was Iranian, looking at, getting into a relationship with the United States is like a woman going back to a boyfriend that used to beat her up, and threaten to kill her. Well, why would you do that? So it's that kind of sick relationship. I was watching, they got these so-called experts here in the United States, and this one so-called expert on this was talking about, well, there are the Sunnis and there are the Shias, and Iran's the most destabilizing terrorist force in the Middle East. I'm going, okay, let's follow that Sunni Shia thing. ISIS. Well, that'd be Shia. That'd be Sunni, not Shia. Sunni, not Shia. Oh, also Sunni. When you look at the most active groups in carrying out attacks against civilians, the definition of terrorism, for political purposes, those are the Sunnis. It's not Iran. Now, Iran backs Hezbollah and Hamas. That's true. But again, go look at the terrorism statistics. Hezbollah has not been carrying out acts of, quote, international terrorism, blowing up airplanes, taking over embassies, destroying embassy. Yeah, they did that back in the 80s and the early 90s, but got away from that. They're focused on liberating Palestine. Same for Hamas. And there was a point at which Hamas and Hezbollah would not necessarily cooperate. But all I can tell you is you go look at the U.S. Department of State's now Bureau of Counterterrorism. They put out the annual country reports on terrorism. You'll not see Hamas or Hezbollah listed in the top 10 groups for actual terrorist attacks. So Iran is not sponsoring terrorism. That's the Western claim, at least not on the level that they claim. And then the West ignores the fact that it has backed groups like the MEK, who have actually been carrying out terrorist attacks in Iran. Now, again, they get the way the story gets presented in Israel is, man, the United States is he's on board with Bibi. And there are a number that were portraying that Trump was just Bibi's puppet. Nonsense. Trump is, he's pursuing his own agenda. And so part of that agenda, he's got to make sure that he keeps the Zionist constituency that backs him happy, moving along, distracted, focused on one thing. But he's also working on some broader peace deals. But Trump's negotiating style is bad cop, good cop. It starts off with the bad. You're disgusting. You're a pig. You're a dictator. You're right. Remember all the nasty things he said about Kim Jong-un. And then all of a sudden he's over there with Kim, hey, little buddy, shaking his hand, rubbing his head with, Trump is, he's very trans. And look, people say, oh, no, so Johnson's a big Trump fan. Yeah, I'm not a Trump fan. I'm just trying to, folks, let's recognize that with Trump, we're seeing something that is uncommon, that you've literally had the full weight of the U.S. government, law enforcement, and intelligence organizations try to destroy him. They have tried to kill him. He's still standing. I don't know if you've ever been involved with a lawsuit where you're getting sued. It's not pleasant. And it really can leave an emotional toll. Good God, what he's faced on that. The Democrats, they figured out, it started under George W. Bush, because I went back and looked at the budget. And in 1990, the budget for USAID was $7.7 billion. And then in 2000, 10 years later, $7.5 billion. So it didn't grow at all in that decade between 1990 and 2000. Under George W. Bush, it increased by about $5 billion, went up to 12.5 billion roughly. And then when Barack Obama comes into office, it went up to another $5 billion. Then when Donald Trump's in office, it goes from 17 billion to 25 billion dollars. I mean, it more than doubles. Now that happened under Trump's watch. Apparently Trump didn't realize it, wasn't aware of it. Again, another sign that because it certainly didn't come because Trump proposed it. And when that happened, what the funds that were set up were money flowing to media outlets. Those media outlets then were attacking Trump. Funds flowing to Hollywood personalities to send them, to places like Ukraine. Money flowing into one of the outfits, the organization for Crime Corruption Reporting Project, OCCRP. So that most of its 60% of its funding comes from the U.S. government, and it's based in I think it's based in Kosovo, but it is has been a strong critic of Russia. It's like an anti-Russian propaganda outlet, but that turns out that was funded by the U.S. government. So I happily took the money. I didn't realize it at the time. So let's at least recognize that he is not a weak person. He's a very strong person. He's not the most articulate. He would never win a debating award for his being able to express himself and to, talk things through with in a philosophical sense, and where you could have almost like an academic discussion. But he's good at reading a room. He's good at reading a crowd, and he sort of knows what's going to sell. He's made a career of it. So that's, there's more going on here than just him saying, I'm going to relocate the Palestinians. Because, okay, if you're going to relocate them, where, how, when, who's going to pay for it? He's well, in all those details, he backs away immediately. So it's not a serious plan. What is a serious plan is he is dismantling the federal government in terms of going after the deep state elements, because it helps you understand Trump he's got a plan about what he's doing that is actually has numbers to it and has, specific goals. This relocating the Palestinians is not a specific goal. There's no plan backing that up. That's I think more of a something to divert attention. The point of this, I don't know if Trump was trying to say these things in order to create this reaction like Smotrich had, like, oh man, Trump's on our side, because people keep saying, yeah, he's bought and paid for by Miriam Edelson. So, I think people read too much into this. Look, I agree. It's callous. It's obscene what he said. It's heartless. It didn't show any kind of compassion whatsoever for the Palestinians. But then you step back and say, okay, he wasn't actually prepared to do something. He wasn't rather say, yeah, U.S. troops are showing up next week. We're going to secure the perimeter. The Palestinians, we're going to put them on boats. We're going to fly them out. No, there's none of that. They're not even at that. They're not even close. And then you saw it the next day when they started walking it back. And when Trump who's going to pay for this? Well, not us. Oh, I guess the fairy godmother, the tooth fairy, who knows, will pay for it. So, there's that issue to be resolved. There's no question that Al-Sisi and Abdullah and Jordan are going to come under great pressure from Trump. But then they're looking at the world and realizing that Russia, China are pushing back. They're not cowering before the United States and giving in. People make the mistake of assuming that it's a plan and that it's something that he has thought through and ready to implement. He's going to remove the Palestinians. Okay, to where? Right after he said this, Jordan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the rest of the world said, oh, wait a minute. No, that's not happening. So there's no place for the Palestinians to go. He didn't specify a time frame. While he implied that the U.S. troops would be involved, they later made it clear, no U.S. troops would ever be involved. He is a sick human being, the finance minister. And he's like, oh, yes, this is what we want. We want to get rid of these Palestinians. We want to force them out. Okay, good. But you're giving up that land, which you claim is yours, to Donald Trump, to the Americans. So it's actually sort of an anti-Zionist proposal. I don't think Trump wants the Israelis to start killing the Palestinians again. He has actually been pretty clear on that, and I think if any, I said he's sort of boxed in. I think Netanyahu and the Israelis they've got to stick with this ceasefire, and they're in phase one, and then phase two starts, and so this thing can be drawn out for several months, and again during that time, the Palestinians will start rebuilding. I'm sure they're rebuilding today as we speak. They're not sitting there recovering remains of loved ones that are buried beneath the rubble. Some of this, I guess what I'm suggesting is some of this is an act and a distraction, because the other thing that's going on, he is negotiating. You authorized Steve Witkoff to negotiate with Iran. And I think there's a strong likelihood that you're going to get a Donald Trump version of JCPOA. You can get a Donald Trump agreement with Iran where he'll get to take credit for being the big peacemaker. And because it's not going to be hard for Iran to say, okay, we're not going to build a nuclear weapon, because they've now got this security treaty with Russia. Gives them some greater confidence now that they're not out on their own. The Ayatollah Ali Khamenei hasn't authorized it. So if Trump gets to come forward and say, woohoo, hey, my tough talk, I threatened Iran and Iran backed down and cut a deal with me. Hey, I'm the deal maker. And if, Iran can put up with Donald Trump taking credit for something that actually, behind the scenes had a completely different color to it. Now, let's not forget that the ceasefire that's now in place, we saw with the hostage releases that have taken so far, Hamas has shown up in force. Hamas is still intact. They're not quite an army, but they are an effective guerrilla force. And they demonstrated that they could fight the Israeli Defense Forces to a standstill. Or maybe it's more appropriate to call them the Israeli Occupation Force. Fought them to a standstill over 15 months, 16 months. Yet when you look at this Israeli Defense Force, which it's fighting within a confined area. It's like 25 miles long and maybe 7 miles, 8 miles wide at the widest point. I mean, we're not talking a massive area. And they got control of all the borders. And with all of those advantages, then they've got complete air superiority. They control everything that flies in the air. They've got artillery. They've got tanks. They have satellite intelligence. They're getting intelligence from the United States. They got every friggin' advantage in the world. And with all that, they could not defeat Hamas. What Israel exhibited is it's not capable of sustaining these kinds of attrition campaigns. Hamas has hung on, and I guarantee you Hamas is not sitting back right now saying, oh, let's just enjoy our victory. And they're preparing for the next round. And, so I said, when you pull that together, the ceasefire was really the handiwork of Donald Trump. Now, the ceasefire, I didn't hear people saying, oh, he's crazy. He's insane. He's Donald Trump, for God's sake. Well, people finally come to recognize this guy he's not normal. And I don't mean that as to suggest that he's some freak from outer space, but he's a guy who's been a public figure and entertainer for so many years that a lot of what he does is public theater. It's not actually a true reflection. And I've used recently the example of, his appearance. Go look it up on YouTube when he got into the ring with Vince McMahon. And they were throwing punches and breaking chairs over. It was all an act. So that's why I think that this. I don't want to say that what Trump said was, nothing of consequence. It was regretful that he said it, but he wasn't saying it as part of a plan that he's prepared to go forward with and implement. And so we got to keep that in mind. I've come to the position that I don't think Israel should exist anymore. It should be, it should not be recognized as a legitimate country for how it conducts itself. I think the Israelis are in the process of killing themselves. They're destroying the very, if you will, moral foundation that they created to justify their existence. But the most important factor at all in all of this is the Palestinians. The images of them marching north the other day with the ceasefire now fully in place. The resilience, the will to live in impossible conditions, and yet they managed to find some way to keep going. It's just a remarkable testimony to the character of the Palestinian people, with the bigger one being that there's no country, particularly Jordan and Egypt, willing to step up and say, okay, we'll carve out some space and dump the Palestinians there. The United States, despite the perception of being powerful, is actually, much weaker than it was, say, 20 years ago. And so each country's going to have to figure out what it wants to do in its own national interest. If we're going to use history, then the United States needs to give up the United States and turn it back over to the Sioux, the Cherokee, the Creek, the Apache, the Iroquois. Got lots of Native American tribes that this was their land before it was ours. If we're going to run that game, then let's play it the same across the board for everybody. And it's worth noting that Hezbollah stuck by its agreement, for the ceasefire, as have the Houthis. They're giving peace a chance. Whether this will hold is a whole nother issue. I mean, judging from history, it won't hold, and they'll be back to killing each other, with the Palestinians suffering the lopsided number of casualties. But Israel is not in a strong position, and particularly Bibi Netanyahu. I mean, did you see how he looked? He's not a well man. He's got sort of that gray color over him. He's dying. I mean, look, the reality is we're all dying. Nobody gets out of this life alive, okay? But he's 3-4 years younger than Donald Trump. Side by side, Trump looked great. Netanyahu looked he was literally great. But he's got that, and then the political situation in Israel is a little uncertain. And on top of that, Israel has stretched out its resources. It doesn't have vast resources. So it's trying to contain things up in Syria now and in Lebanon. And it's carrying out these attacks in the West Bank. They've intensified there.